Hey guys, tonight we slip through a doorway of time, and suddenly the glow of your phone screen is replaced by the dim flicker of tallow candles, reflected in the oily surface of the River Thames. A fog drifts low, the kind that smells faintly of fish, sewage, and wood smoke. And you realize the city you've landed in is both familiar and alien. London, yes, but it's the early 1500s. Instead of car horns, you hear the clip-clop of hooves, the chatter of market stalls, and the occasional splash of something very unpleasant being tossed from an upper window straight into the street. You already know this isn't going to be a walk in the park, and honestly, you probably won't survive this. Sorry, but at least it'll make for a cozy bedtime story. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now in your part of the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The night stretches on, and you're not alone. You're pressed shoulder to shoulder with families crammed into one smoky room because privacy is a luxury you've forgotten. You lie on a straw mattress, but it's not just straw. It rustles with insects, fleas that hop from your arm to your neighbor's leg. The wooden beams above your head creak, coated in soot from the fire that smolders in the hearth. No chimney, just a hole in the roof, so the air is thick and gritty. Breathing here feels like inhaling campfire smoke all night, every night. And then morning arrives with no gentle alarm. Instead, you're jarred awake by the clang of church bells calling everyone to prayer. The bell tower doesn't just mark hours, it rules life. Time isn't a neat row of glowing numbers on your lock screen. It's measured in matins, vespers, and the occasional rooster that doesn't seem to understand your desperate need for one more hour of sleep. You stir, groggy, and realize there's no bathroom. Relief means a wooden bucket in the corner, which someone will empty into the gutter later. Historians still argue whether city officials genuinely cared about sanitation or simply wanted to avoid riots when the stench became unbearable. But either way, the filth piles up faster than anyone can handle. You step outside, squinting at the pale dawn. The air is sharp with frost, and your breath curls in front of you. The streets are narrow, crooked, hemmed in by timbered houses that lean dangerously over your head, as if whispering gossip to one another. Somewhere, a baker's already at work, sending the smell of coarse bread wafting down the lane. That's a small mercy. You're starving, and the scent promises breakfast, though you might not afford it. Money here doesn't jingle in everyone's pocket. Most people barter or live off whatever scraps they can grow, steal, or scavenge. You notice the mud under your boots, though mud is a polite word. It's really a slurry of horse droppings, chamber pot offerings, and rainwater that refuses to drain. Shoes soak quickly, and your toes start to sting. You suddenly miss sneakers and central heating, two inventions that would make you king here. A woman shuffles past with a basket of laundry. She heads toward the river, where she'll scrub clothes against stones until her hands bleed. And while she works, she'll probably share the latest gossip. A neighbor accused of witchcraft, a butcher fined for cheating weights, a noble who looked a little too pale last Sunday. In Tudor London, gossip is both entertainment and survival tool. Knowing who's in favor, or who's one scandal away from disaster, keeps you from accidentally hitching your wagon to the wrong family. You duck into an alehouse for warmth, though it's barely morning. Inside, smoke thickens the rafters, and the floor is sticky with spilled drink. Men already sit hunched over wooden cups, sipping ale weaker than your kombucha, but safer than the Thames water. Mainstream fact: ale really is the go-to drink, morning to night, even for children, because boiling during brewing makes it safer than untreated river water. And here's the quirky bit. Some households use stale ale mixed with herbs as a cleaning solution, scrubbing tables with what you'd rather pour into a glass. At the far table, a man tells a wild story about a comet blazing over the city and whether it means the king will die soon. Superstition mixes freely with religion and politics here. No one rolls their eyes because omens matter. People track the stars and read meaning into everything from the flight of birds to the condition of their bread dough. Scholars still debate whether Tudor people truly believed every omen or simply pretended to for the sake of social harmony. But in a world without Google weather or breaking news alerts, Signs in the sky carried weight. You glance toward the door, half dreaming of slipping back into your own time. But there's no escape, not yet. You're committed to a full day in Tudor Britain, and dawn has only just broken. The chores are waiting, the streets are alive with clatter, the smell of smoke, ale, and unwashed humanity clings to you like a second skin. And already you wonder if one day will be too long. You shuffle back into the lane, and daylight has properly cracked the sky. It isn't golden like the movies, more of a gray wash, filtered through smoke that pours from every hearth. Dawn here doesn't mean peace and quiet. It means work. Immediate, unrelenting, bone-deep work. And since you're technically part of an average Tudor household now, you can't just scroll TikTok under the covers. You've got chores. The first thing you notice is the sheer absence of privacy. Families sleep, wake, eat, and labor in the same single room. If you're lucky enough to have a second chamber, congratulations. You're practically upper middle class. But even then, the idea of a bedroom is laughable. Beds are crowded, often shared. You're on a lumpy mattress stuffed with straw that has to be changed every few weeks, because otherwise it turns into a bug farm. That's where the phrase "hitting the hay" takes on a grimly literal tone. Your first job is to help rekindle the fire. The embers from last night are coaxed into life with damp wood that smolders more than it flames. Smoke pours out, filling your eyes and lungs. You cough, and someone slaps you on the back, muttering that you'll get used to it. Fact: Tudor homes rarely had chimneys at the poorer end of society. Instead, smoke just drifted out through the roof or a hole in the wall. Quirky tidbit: archaeologists have found that rafters in old cottages were so infused with centuries of smoke that they became almost fireproof. Imagine living in a slow cooker that eventually protects itself. Once the fire is breathing, water must be fetched. No running tap. You trudge to the nearest public well, or, if you're particularly unlucky, straight to the Thames with a bucket. The streets are muddy, slippery, and crowded with others doing the same. The water isn't sparkling mountain spring either. It smells faintly of fish and something unmentionable. Historians still argue whether Tudor people genuinely believed the water was fine to drink, or whether they knew it was risky but had no alternative. Either way, you're about to haul gallons back to the house, sloshing on your shoes, which are already soaked through. With water-secured, laundry begins. You watch as linens are scrubbed against boards, beaten with wooden paddles, then laid out on bushes to dry. Soap is harsh, lye-based, and stings if you touch it too long. Your hands already feel raw, and you've only been here for 20 minutes. Then comes breakfast. Except don't expect pancakes or oat milk lattes. It's bread, maybe a hunk of cheese if the family's lucky, and always ale. Yes, even kids are sipping weak ale with their morning crust. The bread is coarse, speckled with bits of unmilled grain that crunch between your teeth. If you're really poor, the bread might be stretched with ground peas or beans, making it heavy and strangely greenish. You chew dutifully, trying not to imagine your usual avocado toast. Outside, other chores await. Chickens need feeding, and if you're in a rural setting, cows must be milked, fields tended, weeds pulled. If you're in London proper, the chores look different. Selling goods in the market, hauling waste, mending clothes. Everyone contributes because survival depends on it. Children as young as 5 are put to work, spinning, sweeping, or helping in workshops. Childhood, as we know it, is practically non-existent. Here you're just a smaller adult with fewer rights. And then, just when you think you've earned a break, someone hands you a broom. Streets are nominally swept, but sweeping doesn't mean sanitary. It means pushing muck to the side so carts can pass. You shove straw, manure, and rotten vegetables into piles, only to watch them slowly dissolve back into the street after the next rainfall. A neighbor leans from her doorway and hollers about your sweeping technique. You shrug, but she isn't joking. Reputation in a Tudor neighborhood is life or death. If people think you're lazy, dishonest, or worse, immoral, your standing collapses. Gossip spreads like fire, and once your name is stained, it sticks. That's why public scolding, called skimmington rides or charivari, often turned into street theater. Neighbors mocking someone for misbehavior with pots, pans, and rude songs. A quirky ritual, but also a brutal form of community control. The rhythm of chores continues, tending to animals, carrying wood, mending tools. By mid-morning, you're drenched in sweat, your back aches, and you've realized something. Life here is a treadmill. Every day begins with the same cycle of work, and if you skip a step, the family risks hunger, cold, or worse. It's exhausting and repetitive, but there's also a strange sense of rhythm to it. You glance around and notice no one's complaining. People joke, sing, and chatter while they work, because complaining wastes energy you don't have. Still, you catch yourself muttering under your breath, wishing you had earbuds and a podcast. Instead, you get a lute player wandering past, strumming something vaguely cheerful, though his strings are out of tune. By now, the sun is properly up, and you're only halfway through the morning list. Remember how last night's mattress was crawling with fleas? Those same fleas are now biting your ankles as you work. You scratch until your skin burns, wondering how anyone endures this. The truth? They don't really notice, because everyone's equally itchy. Historians still argue whether people were resigned to lice and fleas or actively fought them with herbs and ointments. Either way, you're scratching yourself raw. The chores grind on, but so does the clock. You've only been awake for a few hours, yet it feels like you've lived a full day already. And the worst part? There's no such thing as weekend. Tomorrow will look exactly like today, and the day after that too. Sleep suddenly feels very far away, and you realize just how unprepared you are for this endless cycle of dawn and duty. Your arms are already aching from all that hauling, scrubbing, and sweeping, but don't expect any reprieve. The next reality check comes when you try to deal with the mess clinging to your own body. Hygiene in Tudor Britain isn't so much about feeling fresh, it's about simply tolerating the grime without succumbing to disease. And honestly, your tolerance level is about to be tested. First things first, there's no bathroom mirror glowing with a polite ring light to greet you. Instead, you crouch near a cracked metal basin filled with chilly water hauled from the well. Soap, if you can even find it, is rough, lumpy, and made from animal fat boiled with ashes. It leaves your skin dry and smelling faintly of bacon. You splash your face, and instead of feeling refreshed, you just feel damp. That's about as good as it gets. Mainstream fact: most people did not bathe daily. Instead, they relied on what was called a dry wash, rubbing the skin with a linen cloth, sometimes dipped in rose water or vinegar to mask odors. Baths, when they happened, were rare and usually communal. Quirky tidbit: some believe bathing actually opened the pores too much, making you more vulnerable to illness. Better to stay sealed under a protective layer of filth, apparently. Historians still argue whether that belief was truly widespread or simply an excuse people gave for avoiding icy rivers and costly bathhouses. Hair? Forget about shampoo. You rake your fingers through tangles, pick out straw from the bedding, and maybe rub in some powdered herbs if you're lucky. Comb lice out? Sure, if you own a fine-tooth comb. Otherwise, lice live rent-free, along with their buddies, the fleas. That faint itch at your scalp? Yeah, it's exactly what you think. And then there's laundry, the shirt you're wearing right now. It isn't tossed in the hamper at night. Nope, you'll wear it for days, maybe weeks, until it's stiff with sweat and dirt. Underwear, or what passes for it, is a simple linen shift. It absorbs everything, and washing it regularly is a luxury. You start to understand why strong perfumes were popular among the wealthy. Not to smell nice, but to mask the reality. Speaking of masking, let's talk teeth. You want a brush? Too bad. Toothbrushes haven't arrived yet, though people did use twigs or cloths dipped in salt or crushed herbs. Some even rubbed soot across their teeth, believing it polished them, which in a way it did, but it also left your mouth tasting like last night's fireplace. You work at it for a minute, then give up, muttering something about how medieval TikTok filters would need extra sparkle just to make a smile look human. And now we come to the big one: relieving yourself. The chamber pot in the corner isn't going anywhere. You tip it carefully out the window into the gutter, joining the symphony of night soil that's slowly congealing into mud pies in the street. Wealthier homes had privies, but they often drained straight into cesspits that overflowed. The stench alone could knock you back a step. Ever heard the phrase, gong farmer? That was the job title for the poor souls who had to dig out cesspits once they filled. They worked at night with long-handled shovels, wading into filth for pay. Their clothes, unsurprisingly, were burned after every shift. You whisper a silent thank you to the universe that this isn't your assigned role. Even water, the supposed cleanser, is treacherous. You fetched a bucket from the well, but you hesitate before drinking. London's wells often ran close to cesspits. The water looks fine, but it tastes faintly of something earthy. You sip cautiously and immediately wish for bottled mineral water with a twist of lemon. No such luck. Your stomach rumbles uneasily. Still, people had tricks. Rosemary, lavender, and mint weren't just for seasoning. They were stuffed in clothing, scattered on floors, and boiled into brews to keep smells at bay. Walking into a Tudor house, you might find rushes scattered on the floor, topped with herbs. Sounds charming, until you realize the rushes are rarely changed, and underneath them lurks a swamp of old food, spilled ale, and who knows what. Scratch and sniff history would not be a bestseller. You step outside again, hoping for fresher air, but even the streets reek. Animal dung, human waste, fish guts, it all blends together into what Londoners probably didn't even notice anymore. Your nose twitches, but no one else flinches. To them, it's background noise. To you, it's an assault. By mid-morning, your clothes are already sticky, your hair greasy, your skin itchy. You're learning fast that hygiene here isn't about comfort. It's about survival at the bare minimum. Cover the smell, fend off fleas, avoid the worst of the water, and pray you don't end up with sweating sickness from whatever just crawled onto your ankle. And just as you think you've adjusted, a neighbor wanders past wearing a pomander, basically a ball filled with spices and herbs dangling from a chain. It's the Tudor equivalent of a portable air freshener. He waves it under his nose whenever a particularly nasty smell hits. You'd laugh if you weren't desperate for one yourself. By the time the church bells toll noon, you've accepted it. You're never going to feel clean. Soap burns, water betrays you, and even your best effort only results in being slightly less filthy than yesterday. Somewhere in the back of your mind, your modern self vows never to complain about a lukewarm shower again. Your stomach has been growling since dawn chores, and finally food is on the horizon. But don't get too excited. Tudor meals are less about flavor and more about fuel, and even the fuel can be questionable. You shuffle into the kitchen corner, if your household even has a separate kitchen, and find the hearth fire burning low. Someone's already stirring a pot with the kind of determination usually reserved for cauldrons in fairy tales. Breakfast was just bread and ale, but now comes the main meal of the day. Dinner. And here's your first surprise. It happens around 11 a.m., not in the evening. Supper, a lighter meal, will come after sundown. But right now, everyone gathers for the day's big refuel. The table is laid with trenchers. Don't picture plates. These are flat rounds of stale bread, used as edible dishware. You spoon pottage onto yours, a thick stew made from whatever's on hand. Barley, peas, maybe a carrot or two, with the faintest suggestion of meat. The texture is gluey, and the flavor is somewhere between earthy and, well, it won't kill you. Mainstream fact. Bread was the cornerstone of the Tudor diet, eaten at almost every meal. Rich folk ate fine, white manchet loaves, while poorer people gnawed on coarse brown rye or maslin, often dark and heavy. Quirky tidbit, bakers sometimes stretch flour with chalk, alum, or ground bones to bulk it out, which could wreck your digestion but save them money. Historians still argue whether such practices were rampant in London or more common in rural shortages, but either way, you suddenly crave gluten-free sourdough from your favorite cafe. You sip ale alongside the stew. Again, don't imagine a frothy pint. This is small beer, weak in alcohol, slightly sour, and safer than water. Even children drink it without question. And though it doesn't taste amazing, it keeps you hydrated. Well, mostly. After 3 cups, you realize bathroom breaks will be awkward, since the chamber pot is already full again. Every so often, the household might splurge on meat, but don't picture juicy steaks. Pork is common, though preservation is tricky. Salting, smoking, and spicing keep meat edible, but also make it tough as shoe leather. Fish is more reliable, especially herring, which are cheap and plentiful. On Fridays and during Lent, meat is forbidden, so everyone gnaws fish bones instead. You nibble at a hunk of salted cod so dry it threatens to crack a molar. And here's the part you weren't expecting. Spices. Pepper, cinnamon, saffron. These aren't just for the wealthy. Thanks to trade, even poorer families might use small amounts, though often as medicine more than seasoning. Spices are expensive, so tossing a pinch into your pottage feels like showing off. At the market, food variety can surprise you too. Apples, pears, plums, onions, leeks, plenty of familiar produce. But don't expect potatoes or tomatoes. They're still future imports. Instead, you might find something like medlars, fruit so unappetizing it's eaten only when half rotten. Locals politely call them open-arse fruit, which is the least appetizing nickname in history. You pass. And then there are the outright bizarre experiments. Remember how chalk was used to bulk up bread? Some brewers got creative too, throwing odd herbs or worse into ale. Think of it as the Tudor equivalent of energy drink additives, but with more side effects. Imagine sipping Monster brewed with nettles and bog water. Cheers. The dining atmosphere isn't relaxed either. Everyone shares from communal pots, using their hands or knives they brought from home. Forks aren't common yet, and spoons are optional. You tear bread, scoop stew, and hope you don't accidentally grab the chunk your neighbor already gnawed on. Germ theory hasn't arrived, so no one thinks twice. Children slurp noisily, dogs prowl under the table for scraps, and the room hums with chatter. Food is survival, but it's also social glue. This is when gossip spreads, alliances form, and stories get swapped. Someone at the end of the table swears the king keeps a pet lion at the tower, while another insists it's actually a leopard. Historians still argue how exotic animals were cared for in the royal menagerie, but you can bet the gossip kept London buzzing. When the meal ends, the trenchers, now soggy with stew, are given to the poor or fed to animals. You're still hungry though, because pottage fills the belly, but doesn't exactly satisfy. You imagine grabbing a snack bar from your bag, only to remember your bag doesn't exist here. The best you can hope for is a nibble of hard cheese or dried fruit later in the day. As the dishes are cleared, you feel sluggish. The heavy bread, the ale, the salted meat, it all sits like a rock in your stomach. You miss leafy greens, smoothies, and coffee, especially coffee. It hasn't even reached England yet, so if you're craving a latte, you're out of luck. Instead, you push through the drowsiness because chores are waiting again. You step outside, stomach heavy, and pass a street vendor selling pies. They smell amazing. Warm pastry filled with spiced meat. You reach for one, then hesitate. Rumor has it some bakers secretly filled pies with cat or dog meat. Is it true? Scholars still argue. All you know is the vendor looks shifty and the pie smells suspiciously gamey. You step back, pat your stomach, and decide hunger might be safer. By now you understand the Tudor diet isn't about taste or choice. It's about what's cheap, what's in season, and what won't poison you too quickly. And while bread and ale keep you alive, they won't keep you cheerful. You realize food here is just another daily hurdle, and your modern palate is already plotting its escape. Your belly is heavy with salted cod and too much ale, but don't even think about napping. Someone coughs violently in the corner of the room, and suddenly you're reminded that Tudor Britain isn't just exhausting, it's medically terrifying. When something goes wrong with your body here, you can't just book a doctor's appointment or grab some ibuprofen. You step into a world where barber surgeons wield razors, cures involve live pigeons strapped to your feet, and every sneeze sparks fears of witchcraft. Let's start with the professionals or semi-professionals. The barber surgeon is exactly what the name suggests. He'll give you a haircut, pull your tooth, and, if necessary, saw off your leg, all with the same set of tools. His shop is marked by a striped pole, which once symbolized bloody bandages twisting in the wind. You sit down, hoping just for a trim, but he eyes you suspiciously, asking if you've been troubled by bad humors. The prevailing medical belief is that the body is balanced on 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Too much of one and you're in trouble. Mainstream fact: bloodletting was a common treatment intended to rebalance humors. Quirky tidbit: leeches weren't the only method. Sometimes physicians recommended cutting a vein or even applying cups heated with fire to draw out the illness. Historians still argue whether ordinary people believed these cures worked or simply endured them out of desperation. Either way, you're suddenly clutching your arm protectively. If you can't afford a barber surgeon, you might visit a cunning woman or wise man. These folk healers blend herbal remedies, charms, and a dash of superstition. Got a fever? They'll brew willow bark tea, which actually contains the chemical basis of aspirin. Got a toothache? They might whisper a charm into your ear while tying a frog's leg around your neck. You're torn between admiration for their ingenuity and horror at their methods. The wealthy have access to physicians, but don't imagine gleaming clinics. A physician might diagnose you by tasting your urine, literally. They'd hold up a flask to the light, swirl it like wine, and then take a sip. If it tasted sweet, congratulations, you might have the sugar sickness, now known as diabetes. You shudder and pull your chamber pot closer, just in case anyone gets ideas. Sometimes illness isn't blamed on humors at all, but on supernatural forces. If your child wastes away mysteriously, neighbors might whisper about witches. A crooked back, a suspicious glance, or simply being unpopular could land someone accused of cursing the village. Trials range from terrifying to absurd. One method involves tossing the accused into water. If they sink, they're innocent, but dead. If they float, they're guilty and doomed. It's lose-lose unless you're a duck, in which case you're suddenly the gold standard for buoyancy. The remedies get stranger the deeper you look. Got a migraine? A popular suggestion is to press a freshly slaughtered pigeon against your head, the warmth supposedly drawing out the pain. Cracked lips? Rub them with candle wax mixed with soot. Weak eyesight? Some recommend bathing your eyes in the urine of a young boy. You grimace, suddenly grateful for modern eye drops. Toothache is particularly grim. Without anesthetic, teeth are yanked out with pliers. The pain is so bad that people sometimes let rotting teeth fester until the swelling closes half their face. You glance at your molars nervously, vowing never to complain about your dentist again. And then there's surgery. Imagine needing your leg amputated. You're strapped to a chair while men hold you down. The barber surgeon sharpens his saw on the spot. No anesthesia, no antiseptic, no gloves. If you survive the shock and blood loss, infection often finishes the job. Yet some did survive, through sheer willpower and perhaps a lucky immune system. Historians still argue how often such operations were attempted, but even rare cases are enough to make your skin crawl. Childbirth too is perilous, but that's another ordeal looming ahead. For now, you watch as an old woman mixes herbs for a neighbor's cough. The smell of rosemary, sage, and garlic fills the room, almost pleasant compared to the chamber pot stench. You think maybe it'll work, and sometimes it does. Not all remedies are nonsense. Garlic has antibacterial properties and honey soothes wounds. But distinguishing useful medicine from superstition is a gamble, and the stakes are your life. Disease is everywhere. Smallpox scars faces, influenza sweeps households, and the sweating sickness arrives without warning, killing within hours. No one knows why it comes or goes. Some whisper it's God's punishment, others blame foreign traders. You realize how fragile your own body feels in this world, with no vaccines, no antibiotics, and no real understanding of germs. And yet, people endure. They clutch their charms, sip their potions, and trust their neighbor's advice. When you cough into your sleeve, someone nods approvingly, telling you to drink ale with boiled fennel. You smile weakly, pretending it's the cure you wanted all along. By the time the bell rings for afternoon prayers, you've had a full crash course in Tudor medicine. You've survived leeches, pigeon compresses, and chamber pot diagnostics, all without fainting. Barely. But you're beginning to realize, in Tudor Britain, staying alive isn't about thriving. It's about clinging to existence, one bizarre remedy at a time. The afternoon sun slants through the crooked beams of the house, painting the room in dusty light. You're still rattled from the barber surgeon's saw and the pigeon cure. But now another sound fills the air, the low moan of a woman in labor. And suddenly you're dragged into a Tudor reality, even harsher than bloodletting: childbirth. It happens at home, not in a hospital. The expectant mother is surrounded by women, midwives, neighbors, maybe a sister or two. Men are kept firmly outside the chamber, unless something goes terribly wrong. The room is hot, smoky, and crowded, with herbs hung from the rafters to ward off evil spirits. The midwife ties a string of charms to the bedpost, muttering a prayer. You hover awkwardly in the corner, wishing someone had invented epidurals. Mainstream fact: childbirth was one of the most dangerous events in a woman's life. Maternal mortality was staggeringly high, sometimes 1 in 20 births. Quirky tidbit: some women clutch birthing girdles, long parchment scrolls covered in prayers, wrapped around the belly like a holy talisman. Historians still argue whether these girdles were genuine comfort or church-sponsored merchandise, but either way, you're struck by the desperate hope pressed into every fold. The midwife works with practiced hands, coaching the mother to breathe, though pain relief is limited to herbal teas or maybe a gulp of ale. Screams echo through the house. You're reminded that labor wasn't a metaphor. It was work, grueling, and often deadly. If the birth goes smoothly, there's still no guarantee the child will survive long. Infant mortality rates hover around 20 to 30%. A baby might not live past its first week, let alone its first year. That's why baptism happens almost immediately. If the infant doesn't survive, at least the soul is saved. The parish priest stands ready, sometimes baptizing right at the bedside with a bowl of water. You peek at the tiny newborn, red-faced and squalling. Everyone cheers, one more life added to the household. But the midwife's eyes are cautious. She knows many babies will never see adulthood. Families often give children names recycled from dead siblings. Imagine growing up as John III, because the first 2 Johns didn't make it. Grim, but practical. And then there's the superstition. Some mothers hang charms against the evil eye. Others place knives under the bed to ward off spirits. One fringe practice: baking the afterbirth into bread and feeding it to the mother, believing it would restore strength. You gag quietly, promising yourself you'll never complain about prenatal vitamins again. The father, if he's allowed back in, beams with pride, already thinking about apprenticeships or marriages for this squirming bundle. Childhood, as we said earlier, is short. By age 7, this baby will be expected to work, sweep, or tend animals. By 12, a girl might already be preparing for marriage negotiations. You glance at the tiny face and can't help but wonder how many carefree years it will ever have. The mother, pale and sweating, is given spiced wine to recover. Her survival is still uncertain. Fevers, hemorrhage, or infection can strike in the days to come. Without antibiotics, even a small complication can be fatal. Neighbors will check in constantly because community is all anyone has against such odds. You step outside for air, only to overhear hushed talk in the lane. Not every birth ends in celebration. If a baby is malformed, some whisper of curses or sins. Midwives, respected as healers, sometimes risk suspicion as witches if too many infants die under their care. Historians still argue whether witch trials targeted midwives more harshly than other women, but the association lingers in popular imagination. The cycle is relentless. Women may endure a dozen pregnancies, losing many children along the way. It's emotionally brutal, but families keep trying, because children mean workers, heirs, and a fragile kind of security in old age. You watch a group of toddlers chasing a hoop down the lane, barefoot and filthy, laughing despite it all. Their survival is uncertain, but their joy is very real. Inside, the newborn has finally drifted to sleep, swaddled tightly in strips of cloth, arms pinned like a tiny mummy. The midwife explains that swaddling keeps the baby's limbs straight and strong. You raise an eyebrow but argue silently. Who are you to debate 16th century childcare? By evening, the household is exhausted but relieved. Another life has joined the struggle, another mouth to feed, another chance, however slim, at the future. And as you glance at the weary mother, pale and trembling yet smiling faintly, you realize in Tudor Britain, survival is never guaranteed. Not for the parent, not for the child. It's a daily gamble, played over and over again. And the stakes? Always life itself. The newborn's cries still echo faintly in your ears as you step back into the daylight. But now you're dragged into the other half of Tudor survival. Work. Everyone does it, from children barely able to lift a broom to adults bent in the stiff from years of toil. Leisure isn't a right, it's a rare accident. If you want to eat, you work. If you want to avoid shame, you work. And if you dream of rising even a rung on the social ladder, well, you'd better join a guild. The marketplace is already buzzing. The air is thick with the smell of fish, onions, smoke, and human sweat. Stalls line the crooked street, each shouting its wares. Bread, cloth, iron tools, spices. The ground is slick with mud and cabbage leaves, and you dodge a pig that darts between carts. Mainstream fact: guilds controlled nearly every craft, from bakers to blacksmiths. Each guild set rules, fixed prices, and trained apprentices. Without guild approval, you couldn't legally practice a trade in town. Quirky tidbit: some guilds had elaborate feasts and pageants, dressing in costumes and parading through the streets to show off. Imagine Comic-Con, but with more mutton and fewer lightsabers. Historians still argue whether guilds were primarily about protecting workers or simply monopolizing markets. But either way, they ran the economy like a private club. You wander past the blacksmith shop, sparks flying as a man hammers red-hot iron. His apprentice, a boy of maybe 13, works the bellows. Apprenticeship means 7 years of labor, often living in the master's house, eating at his table, and enduring whatever discipline he dishes out. No wages, just food, lodging, and the promise of one day becoming a journeyman. It's a long gamble, but the only route to independence. Across the square, women sell butter, eggs, and wool spun at home. Housewives here aren't idle. They run small-scale businesses to supplement household income. You hear one woman haggling fiercely, accusing a neighbor of watering down the ale. Reputation is everything, and cheating customers can land you in serious trouble. The noise of the market is constant: hawkers, gossipers, the ringing of coins. You notice a boy holding a tray of hot pies, shouting that his are fresh from the oven. You still remember the rumors about mystery meat, so you pass, but others snatch them eagerly. Hunger doesn't leave much room for hesitation. Then you spot the cloth merchants. Rolls of wool, dyed bright with imported colors, hang in the stalls. Fine scarlet cloth is reserved for the wealthy, but you can at least touch the coarser browns. Tailors hover nearby, ready to stitch garments. Fashion here isn't just vanity, it's status. The law literally dictates who can wear what, with sumptuary laws banning commoners from dressing above their rank. Imagine getting fined for wearing designer sneakers because you're not rich enough. Work isn't limited to trades or markets. In rural areas, peasants toil on farms, sowing fields, and reaping grain. The work is seasonal, backbreaking, and utterly dependent on the weather. A bad harvest means starvation. You overhear a farmer muttering about last year's frost wiping out crops, and your stomach tightens. You've barely adjusted to salted cod. What happens when even that runs out? Back in town, laborers haul barrels, mend roofs, or dig ditches. Children chase geese to market, their bare feet slapping in the muck. Women sit spinning flax into thread, chatting as their fingers blur with practice. Everyone contributes because idleness is not just frowned upon, it's sinful. The preacher warns that the devil makes work for idle hands, and neighbors keep sharp eyes on one another. And yet, despite the grind, there are flashes of pride. A shoemaker lifts a finished boot, smiling as he admires the neat stitching. A brewer tastes his ale and nods with satisfaction. These aren't just jobs, they're identities, lifelines, and sometimes legacies. Sons follow fathers, daughters learn mothers' crafts. Work is family. Work is survival. But not all is honest labor. In a shadowed alley, you glimpse beggars clustered, some blind, some crippled, some faking both. Tudor law is harsh on sturdy beggars. Those deemed capable of work but choosing not to. They risk whipping or branding. Still, desperation drives many to it. Because guild membership costs money, and not everyone can buy in. You realize quickly, in this world there's no safety net. Fall out of the system, and you fall hard. By late afternoon, the market begins to thin. Apprentices lug goods back to their master's shops, housewives gather the last onions, and pigs are herded off with much squealing. The square is littered with cabbage leaves, fish heads, and manure, but no one seems bothered. Tomorrow it'll all happen again. You find yourself leaning against a wall, dizzy from the clamor. The rhythm of Tudor work is relentless. No weekends, no retirement plans, no quiet quitting. Just a cycle of labor, trade, and survival. And while there's a certain vibrancy to it, you can't shake the thought. One slip, one bad harvest, one lost apprenticeship, and you'd be ruined. Still, as you watch the smith's apprentice grin at a well-struck blow, or the brewer hum a tune over his vats, you see it clearly. In this hard, unforgiving world, work isn't just duty, it's identity, pride, and maybe even joy, if you're lucky enough to find your place in the grind. The market stalls are packed away, the pigs herded home, and for a brief moment the town seems calmer. Then a bell clangs, sharp and insistent, and people pour into the square. Something's happening. You're about to witness the Tudor version of Law and Order, which, spoiler alert, has very little to do with courtroom drama and a lot more to do with public humiliation. At the center of the square stand the stocks, heavy wooden boards with holes cut for ankles or wrists. A young man is already trapped there, head bowed, while children pelt him with rotten vegetables. His crime? Stealing bread, they say. Mainstream fact. Petty theft often earned punishment in the stocks, where shame mattered more than pain. The community gathered to mock offenders, ensuring no one forgot the lesson. Quirky tidbit. Some towns required you to sit in the stocks with a sign describing your crime. Basically an early version of the mugshot gone viral. Historians still argue whether public punishment genuinely reduced crime or just entertained the crowds. But judging by the jeers around you, it's definitely today's entertainment. Next to the stocks sits the pillory, a taller contraption that locks your head and hands. Offenders here are completely exposed, sometimes for hours. If the crowd is merciful, you leave covered in spoiled eggs. If they're not, you might leave with broken bones. A woman beside you whispers that last month. Someone accused of selling watered-down ale fainted in the pillory after a stone caught her temple. You wince and edge back. Justice here isn't about fairness. It's about making an example. Trials are quick, sometimes lasting only minutes. Evidence, testimony, lawyers, forget it. The justice of the peace or the local lord decides, and punishment follows fast. For serious crimes like murder or treason, the sentence is death, usually by hanging. But even lesser offenses can ruin your life. Gossip alone might drag you into court. Take scolds, for example. Women accused of nagging or causing trouble. They're strapped to a scold's bridle, a metal cage for the head, with a gag pressing down on the tongue. The poor woman is paraded through town like a cautionary tale. You shiver, realizing how easily a sharp tongue could earn a public walk of shame. And then there's the ducking stool. A gossip, cheat, or suspected witch is strapped to a wooden chair and dunked into the river over and over. Sometimes it's meant as humiliation, but sometimes the victim doesn't come back up. You imagine the icy water closing over your head and vow never to badmouth anyone within earshot. You follow the crowd to the courthouse, a timber frame building smelling of ink, sweat, and damp wood. Inside, a case is underway. A farmer accuses his neighbor of letting pigs trample his field. Voices rise, gestures fly, and the judge bangs the table for order. There's no jury, no long deliberation, just testimony, rebuttal, and the judge's ruling. Today the farmer is fined, ordered to pay damages. Tomorrow he might stand accused himself. Outside again, you hear whispers about the most dreaded punishments, executions. A gallows looms on the hill beyond the town. Hangings draw huge crowds treated like festivals. Sellers hawk pies and ale as if it's a fair. Some people bring their children, believing it will scare them into obedience. You shudder, scared straight, taken to the most brutal extreme. But not every punishment is so final. Branding, whipping, or losing an ear are all on the menu. A thief might be branded with a hot iron on the thumb, an indelible mark for life. One wrong move and your reputation is gone forever. Forget moving to a new town for a fresh start. Your scar tells the story before you can. What strikes you most is how reputation is as powerful as any gallows. A whisper that you cheated, lied, or sinned can cost you friends, customers, even your place in the guild. Survival isn't just about food or health. It's about keeping your name clean in a world where gossip runs faster than plague. And speaking of plague, one rumor starts rippling through the crowd. Someone has fallen sick down by the river. Coughing, fever, maybe worse. The punishment square empties a little faster than usual, fear slicing through the jeers. Because Tudor justice is harsh, but disease, you realize, is harsher still. You take one last look at the stocks, the pillory, and the ducking stool. Humiliation, pain, spectacle. This is justice in Tudor Britain. And if you thought surviving childbirth was hard, try surviving your neighbor's gossip. One sharp rumor, and you might find yourself tomorrow's entertainment. The gossip about sickness spreads like wildfire. By the time you reach the crooked lane that runs toward the river, people are already slamming shutters and muttering prayers under their breath. In Tudor Britain, the shadow of plague never feels far away. You don't just worry about your neighbor's gossip putting you in the stocks. You worry about a cough taking out half your street. Mainstream fact: outbreaks of plague swept England repeatedly in the 16th century, sometimes wiping out entire communities. The most dreaded was the bubonic plague, carried by fleas on rats, but typhus, sweating sickness, and smallpox also cut people down. Quirky tidbit: to fight plague, towns sometimes carried sweet-smelling posies or wore beak-like plague doctor masks stuffed with herbs. You're eyeing one in your imagination now, and frankly, it looks like the world's least reassuring Halloween costume. Historians still argue whether Tudor quarantine measures slowed outbreaks or just gave people false hope. But either way, fear of disease shaped daily life. The signs are subtle at first. A neighbor's door marked with chalk, a family suddenly absent from the market, whispers of carts moving late at night. Then the dreaded cry of, "Bring out your dead!" You watch as a cart trundles past, a thin man clanging a bell, his cart piled with shrouded shapes. The smell makes you gag before you even realize what it is. Towns sometimes try quarantine. Infected houses are locked and guarded, their doors marked with a painted red cross. Food is left outside. Neighbors avoid even the shadow of the doorway. Imagine being sealed inside your own house, sick or not, trapped with family members coughing in the dark. You look up at a row of marked doors and feel the air thicken with dread. Medicine is no savior here. Doctors prescribe bleeding, purging, or strange concoctions of herbs. One cure involves pressing a plucked chicken against the sores, hoping the bird will draw out the poison. Another suggests drinking a potion of vinegar, garlic, and crushed emerald. If you're wealthy enough to grind up gemstones, that is. You can't decide what's worse, the smell of vinegar garlic breath or the realization you're drinking powdered jewelry. Public health measures are primitive but earnest. Town officials order streets swept, dung heaps removed, and butchers fined for leaving guts to rot. Fires are lit in marketplaces, the smoke believed to cleanse the air. You squint through the haze, coughing, wondering if you're breathing less plague or just more smoke. The fear is constant. Parents keep children close, and travelers from infected towns are turned away at the gates. Inns sometimes refuse strangers outright. You recall the rutted roads and realize, if you were a sickly traveler, you might simply collapse in the ditch, ignored out of fear. And yet life goes on. Markets reopen, guilds meet, churches hold services. People cling to routine because what else can they do? To stop living is to admit defeat. Still, you notice small gestures, handkerchiefs soaked in vinegar pressed to faces, prayers whispered more fervently, offerings left at shrines. One man ties a sprig of rosemary to his hat, convinced it wards off contagion. You almost laugh, then stop, realizing you'd cling to any scrap of hope too. The most terrifying part? No one knows who will be taken next. The wealthy can flee to country estates, but even nobles aren't safe. Records show entire households vanishing within weeks. You remember that newborn you saw swaddled so tightly, and your chest tightens. Survival feels like a coin toss. A bell tolls in the distance. Slow, deliberate, mournful. Another funeral. In plague years, the sound never stops. Priests grow hoarse, graveyards fill, and coffins are reused. The sight of open pits becomes grimly normal. And still, theories fly. Some blame miasmas or bad air. Others claim sin or divine punishment. You hear someone mutter that comets foretell plague, while another insists it's foreign merchants bringing poison in their wares. Historians still argue how much people truly believe these explanations versus using them as desperate ways to rationalize terror. But you can feel the helplessness. Without germ theory, without antibiotics, fear itself becomes another sickness. You edge back into the marketplace, quieter now, but still alive with trade. The resilience is startling. People bartering onions, apprentices fetching ale, mothers scolding children. The rhythm of life refuses to stop, even with death circling. It's almost comforting, though you notice the shadows under every smile. And as night falls, torches flickering against the half-timbered houses, you realize just how thin the line is here. One day you're a craftsman at work, the next you're a name read at morning prayers, a body carried on the cart. In Tudor Britain, plague isn't just an event. It's a constant threat, like a wolf pacing just beyond the firelight, waiting for a moment of weakness. And if you thought punishment in the stocks was terrifying, wait until you face an enemy no law or prayer can bind. The fear of plague lingers in your chest as you drift toward the town church, its spire rising above the crooked roofs like a stern finger pointed at heaven. Inside, candles flicker against stone walls. Smoke from incense hangs thick in the air, and the murmur of prayers fills the silence. If Tudor justice kept people in line, religion is the glue holding the entire society together. Mainstream fact: England under the Tudors underwent dramatic religious shifts. Henry VIII's break with Rome, Edward VI's Protestant reforms, Mary I's Catholic restoration, and Elizabeth I's compromise settlement. Faith wasn't just private, it was politics, identity, and survival. Quirky tidbit: pews as we know them didn't exist in most parish churches. People stood, walked, or leaned through services that could last hours. Historians still argue whether ordinary villagers truly cared about these theological battles, or whether they simply adapted to whichever creed was safest to profess that decade. You slide into the crowd, pressed shoulder to shoulder with laborers, apprentices, and merchants. The priest chants in Latin, or perhaps in English depending on who's on the throne this year. 1 month holy water is sprinkled, the next it's outlawed. 1 year images of saints line the walls, the next they're smashed by reformers. You realize quickly, keeping up with religion here is like trying to follow the rules of a game where the referee changes every season. Yet the ritual feels grounding. People bow, cross themselves, whisper prayers for health, for crops, for their children. A mother beside you clutches her newborn, the one you saw baptized days ago. Religion is comfort, but it's also insurance. If plague or childbirth steals your life, you'd better have prepared your soul. Beyond the altar, gossip spreads as fast as scripture. Villagers trade whispers about who skipped service, who seemed distracted, who murmured too loudly during the wrong prayer. Attendance is monitored and fines await those absent. You feel eyes on you and shuffle nervously. Skipping church isn't a lazy Sunday choice. It's a suspicious act that could land you in court. Rumors swirl outside the church too. Someone whispers that a neighbor still clings to the old Catholic faith, secretly lighting candles before a hidden statue. Another insists that the miller mocked the priest behind his back. Whether true or not, these murmurs shape reputations. Religion here isn't just belief, it's surveillance. And then there are the big events: saints' days, processions, and mystery plays. You step outside after service to find preparations underway. A parade forms, banners of saints fluttering, guild members marching in costume. Drums pound, bells ring, children scamper with ribbons. Religion bleeds into festival, blurring worship and carnival. You can't help but smile. It's both sacred and ridiculous, a town-wide excuse to dance in the street. Still, you notice how fragile it all is. A decade later, this same parade might be banned as idolatry. A century later, Puritans will strip festivals away entirely. Historians still argue whether Tudor commoners felt betrayed by these constant changes or whether they simply shrugged, muttering, "Keep your head down and go with it." You sense a mixture: faithful devotion in some eyes, weary pragmatism in others. The church isn't just a spiritual hub, it's administrative. Announcements of new laws, market regulations, or even upcoming hangings are read from the pulpit. Everyone must listen because few can read. The parish is also responsible for charity, poor relief, orphan care, burial costs. You realize the church's government, welfare office, and rumor mill all rolled into one. By evening, as candles are snuffed and parishioners drift home, you linger in the graveyard. Mossy stones lean at odd angles, some carved with skulls, hourglasses, or hands pointing skyward. Death is never far, but faith promises meaning. You overhear a father telling his child that angels will guard the graves until Judgment Day. The child nods solemnly, clutching a posy of flowers. As night deepens, you feel a strange comfort in the rhythm of bells, prayers, and hymns. Even if the theology keeps shifting, the structure, the gathering, the ritual, the shared hope anchors this society. Without it, you suspect the whole Tudor world might collapse into chaos. And yet, you can't shake one uneasy thought. In this world, believing the wrong thing at the wrong time could cost you your freedom, your livelihood, even your life. Religion here is not just a path to heaven, it's a tightrope, and one misstep sends you tumbling. The church bells fade into the distance as you wander toward the town gate. The idea of leaving, of seeing the countryside beyond the walls tempts you. Though in Tudor Britain, travel is far from simple. Forget breezy road trips. Think more along the lines of aching feet, dangerous inns, and roads so muddy you'd swear they were designed to swallow boots whole. Mainstream fact: Tudor roads were notoriously poor, little more than dirt tracks pounded by carts and livestock. Paved stretches were rare, and bridges often collapsed or rotted. Quirky tidbit: travelers sometimes carried their own bedbugs in their clothes, meaning even if you avoided filthy inns, you'd still wake up itching. Historians still argue whether Tudor travel was truly impossible for the poor, or whether peasants simply traveled locally, while wealthier folk documented the longer, more uncomfortable journeys. You start walking, the town shrinking behind you. The lane is rutted, uneven, and alive with puddles. Your shoes squelch, and you envy the farmers with sturdy wooden clogs. A cart rattles by, pulled by oxen, its driver cursing every bump. You step aside quickly before a wheel clips you. Roads are shared, and pedestrians rank lowest. The countryside stretches wide and green, dotted with hedgerows and small villages. It looks peaceful, but danger lurks. Bandits, called sturdy rogues in Tudor law, haunt lonely stretches, preying on travelers. You find yourself glancing over your shoulder, clutching your purse. Rumor has it that some highwaymen even posed as harmless pilgrims before turning violent. No wonder people preferred to travel in groups. By dusk, you reach an inn, its sign creaking in the wind. A painted boar, faded and grimy. Inside, the air is thick with smoke, ale, and sweat. A fire blazes, but the benches are hard, the floor littered with straw, and the scent of stale beer never fades. You pay for a shared bed, privacy is a luxury, and squeeze between two snoring strangers. If you're lucky, you'll only wake with fleas. If not, well, enjoy that plague rumor still circling in your head. Dinner is served: a hunk of bread, some cheese, a slice of boiled beef if the cook is generous. A lay flows freely, safer than the water, and the room fills with rowdy songs. You try to smile, but exhaustion pulls at your eyes. You curl under a scratchy blanket, listening to the chorus of snores, farts, and drunken arguments. Forget luxury travel. This is endurance. The next morning, you're back on the road, stomach unsettled, back sore. Inns may offer shelter, but they're expensive. So many poor folks simply sleep in barns or under hedges. Hospitality laws sometimes require villages to take in travelers, but generosity varies. You imagine knocking on a door in the rain, praying for a bowl of pottage, and being turned away. And then there's the weather. Roads flood, wash out, or turn to sticky clay. In winter, frost makes ruts treacherous and carts overturn. You slip twice in 1 mile, cursing quietly, while farmers trudge past with weary indifference. Travel here is a test of stamina, not leisure. Yet despite the hardship, movement is essential. Peddlers carry goods from town to town, apprentices travel to masters, and pilgrims trek to shrines. The roads are arteries, however clogged, keeping Tudor England alive. You pass a group of pilgrims singing as they walk, badges pinned to their cloaks, each step heavy with devotion, or maybe just the hope of a miracle cure at journey's end. By afternoon, your legs ache, your clothes stink, and your patience is thin. And just when you think you can't endure more, you catch sight of another inn sign swaying in the wind. You groan, knowing what awaits. Another smoky room, another bed crawling with strangers' fleas, another night of restless half-sleep. You pause, staring back down the muddy track. Suddenly, the comfort of your town's cramped room and noisy market doesn't seem so bad. Travel here isn't freedom, it's risk. And unless you're wealthy enough for a horse and a retinue, every mile feels like a small battle. So much for your Tudor road trip fantasy. The muddy road and flea-ridden inn fade behind you, replaced by something far more colorful. The sound of pipes, drums, and laughter drifting across the fields. You follow it into a village square where garlands hang, ale barrels are tapped, and a crowd is gathering. At last, you've stumbled upon Tudor recreation, because even in a world of backbreaking work, plague, and punishment, people still find time to play. Mainstream fact: festivals mark the Tudor calendar. Christmas, May Day, Midsummer, harvest fairs, each tied to church or seasonal rhythms. They offered rare breaks from labor and were celebrated with feasts, music, and games. Quirky tidbit: one popular May Day tradition was setting up a massive maypole, sometimes so tall it had to be cut from miles away and hauled into town with dozens of oxen. Historians still argue whether these festivities were innocent fun or thinly veiled opportunities for rowdy misbehavior. But either way, people flocked to them. The square bursts with energy. Men and women dance around the maypole, ribbons twirling, while children chase each other through the crowd. Ale flows freely, loosening tongues and lowering inhibitions. You grab a cup, take a sip, and nearly spit it out. Flat, sour, but definitely stronger than water. Within minutes, your head swims. Games spring up: cudgel contests, wrestling matches, and Shrove-Tide football, which looks less like soccer and more like a violent mob charging through the streets with a ball. You wisely step aside before someone bowls you over. Then comes the darker side of Tudor entertainment. The crowd gathers near a rough wooden ring. Dogs are brought in, snarling, tails stiff. A bear lumbers into view, chained to a post. Welcome to bear baiting, one of the Tudors' favorite blood sports. The dogs are set loose, snapping at the bear's legs, while the crowd roars with excitement. You wince, covering your eyes, though a man beside you slaps his thigh, shouting bets. Mainstream cruelty? Yes, but it's popular, even among royalty. Henry VIII and Elizabeth Thornton both enjoyed bear baiting, sometimes watching it in specially built arenas. You can't help but imagine your Netflix queue replaced with this. And it's not the only blood sport. Cockfighting, bull baiting, and even cat throwing, yes, people literally toss cats into fires for fun, all appear on the Tudor entertainment menu. You mutter to yourself that maybe board games aren't so boring after all. Thankfully, there are gentler diversions too. Minstrels sing bawdy ballads, jugglers toss knives, and traveling players set up a makeshift stage. You squeeze into the crowd as the troupe launches into a morality play. Actors dressed in mismatched costumes, faces painted with flour. The story is simple: virtue versus vice, but the jokes are sharp and the audience howls with laughter. Theater is blossoming here, and soon permanent playhouses like the Theater and eventually Shakespeare's Globe will rise in London. For now, performances are rowdy, improvised, and sometimes scandalous. You laugh despite yourself, swept up in the noise. By evening, the festival grows rowdier. Drunken shouts echo, fists fly, and someone stumbles into a puddle with a splash. A fiddler keeps playing, undeterred, while couples sneak into the shadows. You catch the eye of an old woman selling spiced nuts. She winks knowingly, muttering that babies born 9 months after May Day aren't always counted too carefully. You chuckle nervously, realizing some things never change. Historians still argue whether these festivals were tolerated safety valves, moments for peasants to blow off steam, or dangerous gatherings that authorities tried to regulate. But watching the crowd tonight, you see both sides. Joy, chaos, danger, laughter. It's all tangled together. As the bonfire crackles and sparks fly into the night sky, you lean back, ale warming your belly, ears ringing with song and laughter. For a brief moment, amid all the hardship, Tudor life feels vibrant, defiant, even fun. Until, of course, the bear roars again, and you remember, fun here often comes with teeth. The glow of the festival bonfire still flickers in your eyes as you're swept onward, this time not toward muddy lanes or bear-baiting pits, but toward the shimmering heart of Tudor power, the royal court. Compared to the smoky village inn, it feels like another planet. The walls of the palace gleam with tapestries, courtiers swan about in velvets and silks, and the air reeks of perfumes strong enough to mask 1,000 unwashed bodies. Mainstream fact, the Tudor court was both a political engine and a theater of spectacle. Here, monarchs like Henry VIII and Elizabeth I displayed their power through fashion, ceremony, and endless pageantry. Quirky tidbit, courtiers sometimes padded their calves with wool to make their legs look shapelier, because nothing said important man like beefy hosiery. Historians still argue whether courtly display was genuine devotion to the monarch or just a desperate scramble for favor. But one thing is certain, survival here is no easier than in the plague-ridden streets. You walk into the Great Hall, where musicians play lutes and shawms, their melodies weaving through the air. Long tables groan with roasted meats, pies, and sugared delicacies shaped like castles and dragons. For a moment, your stomach cheers. At last, food without mystery gristle. But then you remember, this feast isn't for you. It's for those wearing ruffs so wide they can barely sip their wine without dunking the lace. Fashion here is armor. Men strut in slashed sleeves stuffed with contrasting fabric, cod pieces proudly puffed like balloons. Women glide by in gowns, stiff with whalebone, skirts wide enough to knock over a stool if they turn too quickly. Jewels glitter. Faces glow with lead-based makeup that looks luminous now, but will poison them slowly later. You try not to stare at the chalky white faces, though one noblewoman's wig is perched so precariously, you wonder if a sneeze might topple it. Every move is watched. A wrong bow, a sloppy curtsy, an outfit a shade too flashy or too dull. Any of it could brand you as foolish, unfashionable, or worse, disrespectful to the monarch. Here, survival isn't about keeping food on the table. It's about reading the invisible rules of etiquette faster than anyone else. And then there's the intrigue. Courtiers gossip in corners, trading whispers of alliances, marriages, and betrayals. Someone smiles too broadly, another laughs too loudly. Behind every gesture is calculation. One rumor of disloyalty, one hint of ambition that looks like treason, and your head could roll. Literally. You glimpse Henry VIII himself, or maybe Elizabeth, depending on the decade you've stumbled into. Either way, the monarch radiates power, every jewel and gesture crafted to inspire awe. You bow deeply, praying your knees don't wobble. To meet the monarch's gaze directly is both thrilling and terrifying. One smile from them, and your fortunes soar. One frown and you're finished. Feasts spill into masks, lavish performances where courtiers dress as gods, heroes, or allegories of virtues. You watch men in gilded armor prance, women in gauzy gowns dance, and fireworks explode in the courtyard. The spectacle dazzles, but you can't shake the thought. How many peasants could be fed with the sugar sculpted into that miniature fortress? Historians still argue whether Tudor monarchs truly believed in their divine right or simply used the pageantry to cement power. But as you watch the courtiers bow and scrape, desperate for scraps of favor, you see how effective it is. The court is a magnet, pulling ambition and vanity into its orbit. And like a magnet, it can also crush anything caught too close. Not all court stories end with feasts and masks. Rumors of poisonings drift through the hall, whispered tales of cups switched, powders slipped into food, rivals eliminated discreetly. Whether true or not, the fear alone keeps courtiers sharp-eyed and suspicious. You eye your ale nervously, deciding maybe thirst is safer than a sip. The night ends with dancing, the monarch joining in, courtiers following their every step. Music swells, laughter echoes, jewels sparkle under candlelight. It feels intoxicating, dazzling, unreal. And yet beneath it all, you sense the tension. No one here is truly at ease. Every smile hides calculation, every gesture masks ambition, Every feast shadows hunger elsewhere. As you slip out into the night air, the cool breeze cutting through the perfume and smoke, you exhale. Court life may dazzle, but it's a world where one wrong move could cost everything. Survival here isn't about dodging plague carts or ducking stocks. It's about never letting your mask slip. And honestly, that might be the hardest challenge of all. The palace gates shut behind you, and suddenly the shimmer of jewels and poison whispers is replaced by the scratch of chalk on a wooden board. You've been deposited into a Tudor schoolroom where a stern master glares at a row of students perched on hard benches. You sink down among them, realizing that learning here is no gentle pastime. It's a test of patience, discipline, and occasionally your backside. Mainstream fact: Tudor education was reserved mostly for boys of wealthy families, though some noble girls received lessons too. Latin, rhetoric, scripture, and logic were the core subjects, with a healthy dose of memorization and recitation. Quirky tidbit: one punishment for lazy students was being forced to wear a donkey's ears hat in front of everyone, because humiliation was apparently a teaching tool. Historians still argue whether Tudor schooling produced genuine critical thinkers or just obedient parrots, but sitting here, you feel more like the latter. The master begins with Latin verbs. You fumble, your tongue tripping over declensions. A sharp rap on the desk makes you jump. "Conjugate faster," he snaps. The boy next to you mutters the answers perfectly, his voice smooth, while you blush and mumble. Within minutes, you're already the dunce. But not all education happens in cramped classrooms. Outside, apprentices learn trades by working with masters: blacksmiths, carpenters, weavers. Street knowledge thrives too. Hucksters teaching tricks to sell wares, sailors passing on knots and tales, midwives whispering remedies. For most Tudor children, this practical school of life matters far more than Latin poetry. And then there's superstition woven into daily learning. Children memorize prayers to ward off evil, learn charms against toothaches, or hear elders insist that carrying a toad in your pocket can cure disease. You roll your eyes, but part of you wonders. After all, garlic on the door frame seems just as effective as the barber surgeon's leeches. Books are rare treasures, chained in churches or jealously guarded in wealthy homes. Printing presses are spreading, though, making pamphlets and plays more accessible. You watch a boy smuggle a small chapbook filled with bawdy ballads, definitely not approved reading material, and grin. Some things about school rebellion never change. One lesson bleeds into another. The Psalms, long lists of kings, strict handwriting drills. Your back aches, your eyes glaze. You think longingly of modern doodling in the margins, but here one ink blot could mean another smack on the knuckles. The air smells of ink, wax, and nervous sweat. Historians still argue how effective this rigid system was. Did it instill discipline and literacy? Yes. Did it stifle imagination? Probably. You suspect Shakespeare, who attended grammar school, somehow turned endless Latin drills into soaring plays. But for every Shakespeare, there must have been hundreds of students too bored or bruised to dream. The school day finally ends, but your education continues outside. In the market square, you overhear gossip, arguably the most powerful teacher of all. Who's marrying whom, which neighbor's cow has gone missing, whether the king's new policy means higher taxes. Every whispered word shapes what people believe, often more than scripture or grammar. And as twilight falls, you realize, learning in Tudor England is less about books and more about survival. Know how to please your master, avoid your teacher's cane, remember your prayers, and pick up enough gossip to stay ahead. And that's your curriculum. You shuffle home, your head pounding with Latin verbs and half-baked superstitions, feeling both slightly wiser and very, very tired. If you thought modern homework was bad, try memorizing 40 Psalms before dawn. The wooden benches of the schoolroom fade away, and you find yourself once again walking through the dusty streets, the sun dipping low behind crooked rooftops. A hush spreads as daylight drains into shadows. Candles flicker in narrow windows. The smell of smoke clings to your clothes and the air cools fast. It's sunset in Tudor England, and as darkness creeps in, the final tally of your day becomes brutally clear. You wouldn't last, not a week, not even a full day. Think of it, the cramped straw mattress you woke on, fleas already biting before you even rubbed the sleep from your eyes. The endless chores and the taste of watered ale because clean water was a gamble. The doctor with his bleeding bowl and potions of ground-up beetles. The childbirth dangers. The markets where a spoiled herring might be your dinner. The stocks waiting if you muttered the wrong words in the wrong crowd. Not to mention plague carts rumbling past. And yet people survived this world, raising families, singing songs, carving out moments of joy. Mainstream fact, life expectancy in Tudor England hovered around 35-40 years, though many children never lived to see adulthood. Quirky tidbit, some people believed wearing a dead man's tooth on a string could cure toothache, because why wouldn't adding a corpse accessory make life easier? Historians still argue whether ordinary people found Tudor life miserable or simply accepted it as normal. But standing here, you can't imagine shrugging it off. The last embers of sunlight sink, leaving only the glow of tallow candles and a scatter of stars overhead. You look around, every sense tingling. The streets aren't safe at night. Watchmen patrol with lanterns, shouting the hour, but thieves and worse still lurk in the alleys. Home beckons, though home is a smoky, drafty hut with no privacy and no lock strong enough to keep out trouble. And here, at the close of one relentless Tudor day, the truth presses on you. Your body aches, your belly grumbles, and your nerves are frayed. You're out of place, out of strength, out of luck. The locals endure because they were born into it, hardened from childhood. You're just visiting, and the era chews up visitors fast. So yes, you probably wouldn't last. And yet, despite the danger and discomfort, there's a strange beauty here too. The ringing of church bells, the flash of ribbons at a festival, the voices raised together in song. Life is brief, harsh, but fiercely alive. Now the square grows still, footsteps fade, and shutters close. You take one last deep breath of wood smoke, damp earth, and the faint sweetness of crushed herbs. The Tudor day ends, and so does your journey. And now, with the Tudor lanterns fading into silence, let's slow everything down. Imagine you're leaving behind the noisy markets, the clatter of bear-baiting arenas, the whispering halls of the palace. One by one, those sounds grow softer, dissolving into the cool hush of night. The roads are empty now. No carts, no shouting, no jostling crowds. Just a gentle breeze moving across the fields, carrying the faint scent of hay and wood smoke. Overhead, the stars blink quietly, just as they did 500 years ago, and just as they still do for you tonight. Your feet are tired, your shoulders heavy, but there's no rush anymore. Every step is slower, calmer, like the world is giving you permission to let go. You've walked through so much, fleas, feasts, festivals, and fears, and now it's time to set all that down. The houses you pass are dark, their fires burned low, families curled up together on straw mattresses. Their day is done, and so is yours. Imagine lying back, eyes half closed, listening not to shouts or coughs, but to the steady, soothing hum of the night. A cricket here, a dog barking far away, the soft crackle of cooling embers. Let those sounds blur. Let your thoughts blur with them. The hardships of Tudor England fade into history, and all that remains is the steady rhythm of your own breathing, slow and easy. And as you rest, safe in your own time, remember, every age has its struggles, but every age also has its quiet nights, its stars, its moments of peace. This is yours now. Let it hold you gently until sleep takes over.